Thanks, Mark. Sorry about that.
Hey, that's right. Thank you very much for giving the opportunity to give a presentation. It's nice to, I guess, show off what we do, and we obviously a good chance to show off what Link's helped us out with. So basically, like as a today we'll give you a preview of the functionality that we've been developing with Link Digital. It relates specifically to some privacy enhancements. So yeah, like it's I think we're due to go into production with something that is 99.99% done in a couple of weeks' time. With one, I think I only had one outstanding bug I mentioned last time, so we'll get that one fixed, and it's not a critical bug, so should be fine to go to prod. Hopefully I can get the slide to. Oh, good, it worked. So just by way of background, there's a bit of a history behind privacy-related issues, but just the background of our team. I'm on the business side, not on the technical side, so I'm hoping no one asks me any particularly technical questions. We have a team of two. We have three representatives here because Dan is leaving in a different team, but he loves open data so much he has to come and join in the meeting. So we actually have a team of two. Dan was involved in a lot of the development of many of these things we've done during this project. So I'm sure Dan will listen with interest as well. But Matt, the other person who's attending from our team, is our current other member of our team. We do everything from customer service, internal, external engagement, comms, policy writing, strategy, product design, and more. And so yeah, we sort of have to put on our jack of all trades hats at times. And so that's our background. There's also a technical team, which is not part of our team, and but they're within our department, and they look after the technical side of operation and maintenance of the CCAN portal, and they look after the hosting. But when we're going to be doing anything that's a substantial enhancement, we engage an external vendor. So yeah, that's pretty much how we've come upon using Link. So appreciate the help. So the reason we're doing this for privacy enhancements is there have been a number of incidents across Australia that have related to release of private information. Some high profile, some not so high profile. Some of them are like only momentary until someone realizes there's a problem and then they pull it down. So as far as open data, you can contain the release. You can't really do it that well because some people are very quick to download things. But yeah, there have been some incidents across Australia and even locally where there's been some accidental release of data. And there's also instances where data is released and with a high risk of re-identification. So that's basically the history as to why we're doing this. Our team had been internally discussing how we could improve some of our privacy processes. And we just coincidentally had a senior executive approach our director at a level above us to say, oh, maybe we should do some privacy enhancements. And so the two aligned quite well, and we managed to get some funding to do some enhancements in the privacy space. So that's how we've ended up getting to where we are. So that allowed our team, to put on our business analyst hats this time and convert the ideas into some requirements. And then we went to the market, and Link has been brought on board as our vendor. Let's see if I can get to the next page. So for this project, we had about 10 requirements, and it did extend a little bit during the process. Through discovery, we discovered a little bit more complexity. So I wanted to thank Link for their flexibility, and they accommodated those changes with no dramas and helped us out with them, to be quite honest. So we've split the work into two main parts. They are supporting broad effective use of data schemas, and the second is enabling privacy assessments using CCAN. So part one. So the focus obviously was privacy. That's why this is all being done. But using data schemas also has the aspect of improving data quality. So it's a secondary purpose. So we already had the CCAN Next validation extension installed, but we had it configured to basically, I know that it can be run to do a bit of a data quality check, but we only had it configured to run to do assessments of structure and content based on a JSON data schema. So that's how we had ours set up. The problem with that, as it was, is that it required, for publishers to use it, it required some knowledge of JSON data schemas using the frictionless data model for it to function properly, which has been a challenge for us. So this is one of the reasons why we were happy to make some changes. Again, background, trying to get too much, I might skip over some of this. We had, over probably several years ago, started a process where we supported the development of a open source desktop application called Data Curator. Problem was it generated, its output was a JSON package schema, and for the validation extension to work, you need table schema, and table schema is a subset of the package schema. So in order to use it for that purpose, for the purpose of generating a table schema, you needed to know how to extract the table schema out of the package schema. So we, in the end, even though the intention was probably to do some sort of integration at some point between Data Curator and our CCAN instance, it became obvious it was far too complicated. So basically we accepted that most of our publishers are not technical. They're probably part-time data people. So we needed to come up with another way of doing this, and we determined the best way to do it was to use the portal, and within the portal be able to generate a JSON schema and then be able to apply it. That's pretty much how the genesis of that one came about. So there were limitations, obviously, with the validation extension, as we saw it as being effective for helping out with privacy. Part of that was that the schemas are only applied on a per resource basis. So the way some of our data sets work, and I'm sure some of the jurisdictions do things a little differently, but you probably find it's consistent across many that, especially with time series data, you have a data set that contains many resources, and so all of those resources are structurally the same. So the idea of having to apply the schema for each resource was a bit frustrating for us. We found that to be a bit of an impediment to using schemas. So we came up with the concept of creating a default data schema, bit of a mouthful. So the idea is that it happens at the data set level instead of being applied on a per resource level. I think that's probably enough on that page. So we love a good flowchart. You might not be able to see the detail in this because of the resolution on the screens. I just flashed it up there to show off the complexity of the process. What was initially what we thought was a reasonably straightforward thing is to come up with the concept of applying a default across all resources within a data set. Turned out to be a little complex. And so our team was bashing our heads against a wall many times thinking, why did we bother starting this? This is too complex. So I guess it just flashed up this flowchart to show that we have gone through the process of, I think I probably spent many days in total coming up with this flowchart, but we got there in the end, and I think it's a pretty functional process. I'll go to the next slide, I think. Don't even try to read it, it's, yeah. So I wanted to do a demo at this stage so that I could actually show you, because it's a bit boring just hearing me talk. Okay, so this is just our homepage on the portal. So things we've changed. I'll just navigate my way through to, I'll get rid of those, I'll filter out those ones. I think it doesn't really matter too much for this one. I'll just add a new data set. So the things that we've changed in relation to the data set screen is to add this default data schema. If anyone else has the validation extension installed, this probably looks pretty familiar. We just put the title default data schema at the front, essentially. When we first had this configured prior to this project, we didn't have this JSON button here. We only had the upload and link options. This is actually a standard functionality, but we chose not to do it initially. So we've chosen to activate that button now. And we find that button is going to be really useful for our publishers because they can click on it, as you can see here, and it creates a free text field. And that enables them, if they have an existing JSON schema, they can use that to just paste it straight in. Whilst I'm talking about that, I can probably show you something else that we do. So this is a template for what is a mandatory data set for our government departments, our Queensland government departments. They have to report on overseas travel is one of them. So what happens is there's a Excel spreadsheet here that gives them a metadata guide. They can fill in some details, and then some of them are pre-populated for them, and then they can fill out any details that they need to customize for their next release. And then in this template that we've set up for them, there's a field here for the JSON data schema that relates specifically to this data. So what I can do is copy that and just paste it into the field. And so it's as easy as that if you have a pre-existing JSON. So that's pretty much the demo of that side of things. I won't bother saving anything there. The next part is, so we went through a process of sort of deciding on some rules as to how things behave, and this is where things got a little complex and why that flowchart looks like it did. Is that obviously you need to choose some rules. So I just got some examples here I thought I'd show you. If a data set schema has been set, so in this data set, this example data set I've got here, this is just our staging environment, by the way. It's not live data. So we've got some test stuff, as you can see. So you can see with this in the additional info here, the default data schema exists. So there is a schema file there. How did that go?
I think it's coming. Yep.
Excellent. I'll scoot through to where we're up to. My apologies for this.
That's cool.
I think I was probably on that page. I was demonstrating this stuff.
Yep.
I'm not exactly sure where I jumped out, but I'll just kick in and we'll see how we go. I'll just jump in and basically talk about some more of the rules that we were doing. I think that was probably where I was up to. So when you go into one of these resources, I'll manage the metadata. You can see that this resource has had the data schema applied in the standard field there. If I think I was saying, I'm not sure exactly where I jumped out, but we basically decided to apply the default data schema to resources whenever you add a new resource. If you want to have it not apply, you have to go into the resource and edit it and remove it. So the process, obviously, with this screen up is as easy as just clear it and save. So you can see when I did that, because there's a default data schema, it pops up with a little button that asks you if you want to realign it or if I want to align it with the default. So I can just click on it and it aligns it with the default. So that's basically that's the basic behavior. There are some rules that are going on to enable that all going on in the background, but that's probably the basic stuff. Because I've lost a couple of minutes, I'm going to catch up by tearing through it. Give me a second, I'll just try to get this to work properly. So I can get the next slide up. So that's only, so far what we've done is just cover what you would do if you had an pre-existing data schema. So we wanted to actually make a process for creating a data schema because most of our publishers are not technical in any way. So the idea was to make it a optional process, not mandatory. Initially we're making a manual process, and we wanted to be able to apply it to, give me a second, I'm just trying to find that page again that I had. We wanted to be able to apply it so data schema. So you can see in the menu bar that appears at the top of a resource, when you're managing a resource, we just added a tab called data schema. And it looks very similar to what you might see in the data dictionary or the data store tabs in terms of behavior. So you can manually click on the generate JSON data schema, and it'll go off and do its thing and work through the structure, and comes back and tells you. So I just have to refresh that page to make that work. and this generated the data schema based on the resources table. The bit at the bottom here, so we made that non-editable. So we wanted to make that a point-in-time reference that related, when you chose to do it. So we made that non-editable. If you want to edit it, you do that in the metadata in the resource page or in the dataset page if you're using a default. So there, basically, once you've generated this data schema, you can apply it. So this little field here is to say, I want to apply it as a dataset default, or I want to apply it just to this resource. So if you apply it as a dataset default, because you're doing this from within a given resource, it will also apply this schema as the schema for this resource as well as the dataset default. And that's pretty much how that works. When you make this change here, it doesn't actually change any of the pre-existing resources. It only affects the default or this resource. So what we've done by doing that is enabling. Go to the next page. We're basically enabling quite a bit of differentiation in how you would choose to manage your resources within a data set. Some could have schemas, some could have different schemas. Some can use the default, some can have none. It's flexible in that way. So we also had to do a couple of things where we're making the resource blocked when it comes up as invalid according to the validation process, but only where it contains de-identified data. That's a thing on our side that we customized so that our publishers can specify that the data set contains data that has been basically de-identified, or its source material was that it once came from data that contained personal information. So when you've got that condition in your data set, it will do an immediate block. The idea being that you want to block accidental publishing if it doesn't meet the criteria. Other things that we did, we had to do API publishing slightly differently because you don't, in the API publishing side of things, you don't have some of the front-end controls. So we had to do some trust, have some trust in our publishers who are capable of doing API, that they're going to do the right thing. What else have we got? We also set up a report in the admin report. So we have this thing in our system called an admin report. I can show you a quick example of that as well. So we've got under, this is my dashboard, and we've got set up a My Reports tab here. And then if I click on the admin report and choose any old, I'll do test organization because that's the test data. And I show that, it goes off and finds the data, and it seems to be taking longer than it usually does. Good. And it just presents a table. So we've got something in here for de-identified data sets without default data schema. This one has 0, so that's all good. So basically that just allows our people, because the departments, we've got sort of a very decentralized system where the departments are responsible for managing their own open data. We're just responsible for the portal, managing the portal itself. So we have representatives within departments that can go to this admin page and they can see the status of things. So this is just a new variable has been added to the status page, so they can monitor that. And let's see, what else are we up to? Go to the next one. I probably don't need to waste time with the summary. I'm sure you're all listening, and it was very interesting. So part two is we were enabling privacy assessment. So this is a brainchild to be able to give some feedback to publishers on when they're able to send us a resource and have us run a privacy assessment across it and give them some results of that privacy assessment. The whole basis behind this is that governments have to deal with the privacy legislation within their state. And I'm sure that most people listening would understand this, and so the privacy legislation is probably very similar, and it has to, I've actually got the wording here, what is it, the wording? Agencies should not publish data that could, I think I've just paraphrased, should not publish data that could reasonably allow the identity of an individual to be obtained from the data. So basically because a lot of the data that government holds comes from information that contains personal data, it's actually quite a risk for agencies to even publish any open data that comes from that because of the opportunity for re-identification. So that acts as quite a disincentive to publishing. So we're trying to somewhat remove that disincentive, or to minimize that disincentive by providing a tool that gives them some information that helps them to recognize the privacy risk within their data. So yeah, our initial goal was to come up with something that was rather simple, and it didn't work out the way we hoped. It became a little more complicated than we thought it would be. So we wanted to automate an objective assessment of this privacy risk and give them a rather simplistic answer, but you can't do that with privacy. Our major problem we found is that the answer always came back to the privacy risk really depends on the nature of the data, and the only people who best understand the nature of the data are the publishers themselves. So it's really hard for us to have some sort of objective assessment of privacy that gives them a simplistic answer. So instead, we chose to focus on discovering the data characteristics that contribute to an increased privacy risk. Now, the tool itself is a subject of its own, so I won't really go into that. I'll just go into basically what we did to use CCAN to make that work. So we needed a platform to request an assessment of some data, but we also needed a platform to host some draft data that a publisher would want to give to us to run the tool over. Now, we had previously customized CCAN to hide a resource. It was one of our use cases a couple of years ago to be able to hide resources. So we, in the same way that you might hide a data set using the visibility metadata feature. So we thought we could use that to hide, so basically allows publishers to use the Open Data Portal to publish, for the purposes of what we're doing is they're publishing it, which uploads it to the database, and then it's in a position where we can run the tool over it. But whenever they request a privacy assessment, it automatically hides the resource, so it's hidden from public view. It also makes the data accessible to our assessment tool via API. So we sort of discovered that we could just sort of do it internally without having to come up with a new platform. The other thing was obviously we needed to be able to report the assessment result back to the publisher. So all of these things are reasonably straightforward. I can probably just show you the fields again. You might have seen them a little bit. Where are we going? So within the resource metadata, you can request a privacy assessment here. Yes. And there's also a field has been added for inserting the privacy assessment result. When we designed this, we hadn't actually designed the tool itself when we started this project. So we've since been trying to design the tool, which we've pretty much done. So we determined that we can publish the results in a Excel document back into the data set itself as a hidden resource. And we can then publish the link into this field to that resource. And that gives them the opportunity to have it all in one place. I think that covers off on that. We also, sorry, let's get rid of that screen. And we also set up an email notification process so that once there is something added to that field in the resource, a notification is sent to the publisher to let them know that the result has come through. And as you might have seen, because I had it we also added something to the admin report, which I showed you here. So pending privacy assessment. So this is how it looks when you click on the link. It tells you how many there are, and it gives you links to those files that are pending a privacy assessment. So it's really just ways of keeping track. It's good for our team. It's a place for us to keep track of the requests. I'll get rid of that. And that's the end of the split presentation. My apologies for the technical malfunction in the middle. Happy to answer any questions that anyone might have.
That was